Originally, I'd wrote an entirely different review for this game, but after live streaming it, talking with viewers about it, and playing much farther in the game, I decided that I wanted to do a much different focus on this game and what it offers. High School Crisis feels like an old-school dungeon crawler game, more specifically seemingly inspired by the Famicom era of Shin Megami Tensei games like SMT 1, 2, or If. It uses AI art for several of its assets, including all of the main characters and enemies, and I'll address this later during the review. Starting off, there are a few difficulties to choose from, and the sound effects do not stand out, nor do they detract from the experience. The music can be described as a pale imitation of older SMT titles, which I consider having some of the best soundtracks in the series. High School Crisis has music with a retro feeling, to which in turn feels nostalgic, but none of the instrumentation carries the weight or ability to get stuck in your head like what it appears to be inspired by. The story starts off with high school students experiencing an earthquake, which leads to them discovering the school has been transported to the demon realm. They meet a nutty demon professor, and the group sets out into the world to find a way to return home, which presumably involves an object known as the monolith. The monolith's location is unknown, and so the group of children set out to find it, which expectedly turns into a wild goose chase. Gameplay is 99% navigating dungeons and cities that feel like dungeons. Once you leave the school, you'll get to choose other locations to visit, unlocked one by one, so there's not usually a lot of confusion on generally where to go, but many of the maps can be awkward and confusing to navigate. A big saving grace this game has is the ability to auto-travel to locations you visited on the map, so you can more easily get back to locations without having to remember the specific path to take. The caveat to this is that you are not able to navigate through doors, so you have to auto-navigate to a door, open it, and then navigate again to your desired location. Many areas have multiple doors, so this process, while a good addition, still provides some frustration. Later areas include additional features such as traps on the floor and one-way doors, adding to the complexity and challenges of navigating areas. Enemies are shown on the map represented by almost comical-looking neon glowing ghost figures who freely move around in patrols. Combat is initiated by running into the ghosts. If you encounter them from the side or the back, you'll gain initiative and advantage, and if they encounter you first, then you'll start off at a disadvantage, with the enemies attacking first and delaying your initial attacks. Combat is standard turn-based style. The battle screen has a turn order at the top of the screen showing who is next, and the character portraits move from left to right. When a portrait reaches the farthest right, it is their turn to attack. There are several magic and physical attacks. Physical attacks are primarily based on your equipped weapon, and most weapon and armor are restricted to male or female genders. Magic appears to be preset for each character, and as they level up, more are unlocked. There are attack magic separated into elements, as you see in basically all RPGs: lightning, fire, ice, etc. Enemies are weak or strong against different types of attacks, and once you attack an enemy, it will show in a bar above their head what they are weak or strong against, which is helpful with later encounters with them. There's also a variety of buff and debuff skills which can be used to your advantage in battles, though this is primarily true for boss fights or first encounters in new areas, as once you level up enough, the regular enemies will be cut down rather fast. The game also features a magic crafting mechanic, but honestly, I found it not worth the hassle, and I didn't even bother really getting into it. The players' party is massive, and you can have up to 6 players in your active team fighting. Each character is pre-built, and each has their own strength and weakness in combat as far as abilities and ability growth goes. Stats for characters are allocated by the player, allowing for a slight bit of custom tailoring. Characters have a wide range of equipment they can be equipped with. In most areas, there are a number of weapons and outfit pieces that can be found if you explore heavily enough, and in cities there are stores to purchase more from. Equipment is restricted to genders, so some items and armors can only be equipped by males and some only for females. Bosses in this game can be very tricky to defeat, even on easy difficulty, depending on your weapons and armor. The first boss, for example, wiped my team out in one hit when I wasn't equipped properly. The difference was radical though, as when I was fully equipped, I one-hit the boss. Later in the game, bosses are much tougher though, and certain disadvantages can make these battles nasty. The second main boss kidnapped all the female party members on my team, and so I had to grind extra hard and use type advantage and healing items to my full advantage in order to win the fight, which took multiple tries. It was also a very long battle, as when you're fighting bosses without the ability to attack their type weaknesses, you do very little damage comparative to their massive HP amount. I also noticed, but only have personal experience to back this up, that enemies seem to often target the weakest members of your party. Since you don't start off with your full party from the beginning, some of your characters end up lower level than the rest, and it seems enemies like to take advantage of that, and it was very common for me to frustratingly have my low level party members killed at the beginning of battle, which results in them not acquiring XP and becoming stronger after fights. At times this left me to grind and hope I was able to kill the enemies faster than they could hit that character so I could level them up, and then to ensure they weren't killed so fast, I felt forced to pour all of my stat points into defense or strength, reducing the amount of attack power they have in battles if they are a magic user. Overall, the balancing just feels off later in the game with available weapons. The third area has some incredibly powerful weapons for sale, which, if you can afford them, allows characters to one-hit most enemies, but they come at a high cost. Money itself is challenging to acquire directly, as most enemies drop very little. However, if you're exploring deeply, then you'll find a variety of weapons and armors that are unneeded for your party, and selling them is a primary way to get a pretty large amount of money fast. Due to the amount of money you need if you want to buy from shops, money overall feels challenging to come up with. With the core game mechanics discussed, I want to talk about some things I like and dislike about this game after I go over who I believe is the perfect fan base for this game. Who is the perfect fan base? I'd say this game appears to me to be directly made for those who enjoy old Shin Megami Tensei titles, enjoy old feeling game mechanics and gameplay, and who are open to the negatives that come with this type of design. Overwhelmingly, the game feels like an old game, plays like an old game, and it mostly looks like an old game. If you didn't grow up in this era of gaming, or you don't have a fondness, nostalgia, or interest in Famicom era level dungeon crawlers, this game will offer very little to you. It will feel thin, boring, and confusing at times. I, however, am basically an old man in gaming terms, and for me, while it has a ton of negatives, it also has this really old, nostalgic feeling that I desperately wanted to hold on to. Outside of the blatant generic AI generations, playing this game felt like going back to an old classic comfort title, and the beginning legitimately made me feel like I was replaying SMT If. The issue though is that this type of game is frustrating. I found it so frustrating that by the time I got to the second city, I really got over anything I liked about the game very quickly. The second city introduces you to a bunch of stuff reminiscent of the worst parts of that era of gaming. The second city is basically a mall, and as you explore, you find that your main goal is to reach the top of the tower and join a party hosted by what I assume to be your second major boss. As you climb the tower to the third floor, you find out that the only way up farther is to use an elevator, which is currently being repaired by the maintenance demon of the building. The problem is that this demon doesn't have his partner, and so you're tasked to flip two switches located on the first floor. While located on the first floor, you actually can't access them from the first floor though, due to one-way doors in that area. Instead, you must go to the second floor and find the correct pitfalls to fall into the correct areas of the first floor. They are separated, so you need to do this twice. However, as an added frustration bonus, the developers also decided that the other characters in your party should confuse you when toggling the switch, as one of them chimes in with their opinion on how the switches should be toggled, and even goes as far as to make you second guess yourself after you've made your decision. Despite writing down what the maintenance guy did, my team confused me, and after following their feedback, I reported back to the maintenance staff only to find out my team was incorrect, which resulted in me having to start the entire process over. After that is completed, I soon reached another elevator that was blocked by the bouncer to the party. The bouncer informed me that there was a specific dress code based on the time of day. The dress code was different for males and females and could only be purchased at verified shops in the complex I was in. This meant that I needed to go to the second and first floors to find the correct vendors selling the required clothing. I spent time doing that, and I found the clothing for the males for the morning dress code, but ran into issues with the female clothing requirement as the text for what they needed to equip did not match what the stores described the clothing as. I'm not sure if this was the case of me not finding the correct store for the female clothing or if there's a translation error, but the frustration of going from store to store and maneuvering around the very annoyingly put together map caused me to basically quit the game at this point. The game really tested my patience with this series of objectives and really caused me a lot of concern as to what the future areas might require. I was able to give up on morning clothes and found options for the evening, which made more sense, which allowed me to continue on with the game, but I progressively felt more drained the farther I got into it. Another gripe I have about the game is its heavy use of AI. It is clearly stated on the Steam page that the game uses AI for characters and some background elements, which is a requirement for developers now on Steam, but it's good to see not hidden so players know what to expect. When I requested a review copy of the game, I didn't notice it used AI generation, but after playing the game, it really sucks honestly. A number of viewers on my live stream thought I was going a little far with my negative thoughts on its use in the game, but I personally don't really like how it's utilized here. One of the highlights of playing Shin Megami Tensei and Persona titles is how interesting the demons and characters are. In those titles, the demons are based off real-life lore, and their depictions feel fun in the way that they show personality by their poses and presentation. Main characters are also depicted in those games with various flair and style that makes them stand out and feel unique. You can look at the demons and characters in those series and get an impression of them by appearance alone, which is not something that can be said about High School Crisis. The characters and demons feel generic and lifeless. It's all just very cookie cutter. I can't help but dislike this choice despite it being very likely due to budget and the skills of the dev team. While flawed, this game will find fans. I don't think it'll be a massive hit by any means, and I'm certain there's going to be a lot of people who hate it just for the fact that it uses AI elements so heavily. Others will find a lot of critiques about the gameplay mechanics, and others will have a great time feeling like they're playing a new old game. As for me, I keep coming back to it for some reason that I can identify, so I'm sure I'll complete it at some point, but I'm left very conflicted as to whether or not I want to recommend it. Currently, it's about $15, which sounds about right, so I suggest if you think this sounds interesting to try it out. Wish there was a demo, but as far as I'm aware, there is not one available. I'm Dre, the Otaku. If you like this content, hit the thumbs up. If you don't, hit the thumbs down. Subscribe for more anime news, reviews, and gaming. I'll catch you on the next one.